Welcome back to another Lich King card review. This time around, we've got some warrior cards and some demon hunter cards, including the shiny new warrior legendary Azvedon, the Grand Shield, a 3-mana 3/3 battle cry. Cast a copy of the last spell that your opponent played. So this seems to be the centerpiece of this kind of opponent spell package. We've got ways to disrupt opponent spells and deny opponent spells and can't be targeted for spells. And this guy that's copying your opponent's spells. So this sort of spell breaker idea for warriors, a pretty nice theme. And for Azvedon himself, of course, some cool potential with this card. If your opponent plays, say, a Rune of the Archmage, then you can get your own 3-mana Rune of the Archmage. And obviously that's really nice when it's that affordable, and you're getting a 3/3 body attached to it. And that can be really swingy because you're going to have some mana left over to spend as well, allowing you to potentially cheat out some big stuff on the back of Azvedon while still making plays, still getting a 3/3 on board. You could see some scenarios where that lines up really nicely. Now, of course, I don't think you need a 9-mana spell to make Azvedon worth it because he's coming with this base 3/3 body. I think cheap spells are going to feel just fine sometimes for Azvedon. Maybe your opponent plays a secret and you just want to see what their secret is and get your own secret. Slam an Azvedon. If it's not objection, at least you're going to get a copy of that secret. So that could be nice. Even just like a little card draw card. They just play like a 2-mana card draw. Okay, cool. I'm going to Azvedon into some card draw. I get a body down. That's fine. Maybe they play some kind of removal spell, whether that's, a big brawl type effect or even something smaller, single targety. You might just take a chance on Azvedon hitting a roll there with some good, random drain souls or something to try to clear something of your opponents. And it's probably going to feel okay in those scenarios, and there will be certain scenarios where it just feels absolutely insane. Now, of course, there is a risk for this card, and that is that some matchups don't really run spells that you care about copying, or sometimes don't really run mini spells at all, honestly. So things like minion-based aggro decks, for instance, Azvedon might feel really bad there, where there's just no turn, where there's a spell that's helpful to your game plan. You might just play him as a 3/3 in those scenarios, which of course that's not going to feel great. So there will be times when this feels pretty stuck in hand, and even in certain matchups, where they do have spells, it might still feel clunky. Like you're just waiting on the 4 or 5 turns to find the right sort of moment to play this guy, or find a spell that's both worth it, but also lines up in a given board state. If they play a Flame Strike to clear your board, yeah, you can copy a Flame Strike, but not if they have an empty board, right? Then you're just like, oh, okay, well, this is stupid. I don't need a Flame Strike right now. And then if it goes to a future turn, it won't be Flame Strike again in the future, right? So I think there will be these really awkward scenarios where Azvedon is just chilling in hand from time to time. So you're going to need a deck that's running this that can sustain those down moments, that can sit on dead cards in hand. So things like, a control warrior with sufficient amount of card draw where they have time and they have options might be a home for Azvedon in that regard, because I don't think you're going to be able to play him any given turn and feel good about it. He's going to take the right moments and key moments probably to actually feel like a powerful play, but I do think he'll feel like a powerful play from time to time. Hey, real quick, before we move on, I'd like to talk about our sponsor for this video, Babbel. I know there are a bunch of you out there just like me who took a foreign language class in high school. I actually took 4 years of Spanish. But you probably feel like you don't have a great grasp on the language. Maybe you've forgotten everything you learned. That's certainly where I'm at, and I'd like to fix that. It'd be nice to take the wife on a trip or two and actually be able to communicate. And I think Babbel might be the perfect place to do that. They're scientifically proven to help you start speaking a new language in just 3 weeks. Their lessons are designed by real language teachers and focus on practical, real-life conversations.
Mucho gusto. Yo soy Juan.
Mucho gusto, yo soy Juan. Excelente, Regis! 19 out of 19, let's go! They'll prepare you to have conversations about travel and business and relationships. You're not just going to learn a bunch of random vocabulary words that you forget 15 years out of high school like I have. So Babbel has a few different subscriptions you can choose from, including a lifetime subscription, and they offer a 20-day money-back guarantee. So all in all, Babbel is one of the top language apps in the world, and you can get 60% off your subscription using that link down there in the description. Adios. So next up here we have the Disruptive Spellbreaker, of course another Spellbreaker themed card for Warrior. 5 mana 4/5. At the end of your turn, your opponent discards a spell. So we've got some actual spell disruption. Hearthstone has a lot of minion disruption these days, I feel like. The Mutanuses of the world. I guess Theotar doesn't really care. He just takes whatever he wants. But this is more like a Mutanus for spells. And of course, denying your opponent a resource that's already in hand is really, really valuable. And in fact, this can even do it multiple times if it manages to stick around on board. Maybe, you know, he'll discard the spell that would have removed it. I think there's actually a chance that happens fairly often, where this becomes a little bit harder to kill because whatever kind of thing they had as an answer just got dumped out of their hand. Of course, he won't always stick around, but I think he might sneak around for a turn or two, for 2 turns more often than you might expect. And of course, that's some really nice snowballing advantage. Now, I will say, I think on average, discarding a spell or eating a spell is less valuable than a minion. I think particularly the way Hearthstone is structured right now, we have a lot of these like big bomb minions that are really important finishers and important combo pieces, and legendary minions are often like build arounds for your deck. We don't see that quite as often for spells because a lot of people, particularly for more like late game oriented decks, they're running a ton of cheap spells, small reactive stuff, little card draw things, right? That's not like the big home run stuff. So I don't think this will be as like game ending as often as, say, like stealing your opponent's Denathrius is a game ending sort of play. But I think it will still offer enough consistent disruption, and it will offer enough like card advantage for, say, a control warrior deck that I could absolutely see this making the cut. I think just taking cards right out of hand is actually rather powerful. Even if they are sometimes smaller spells, the opportunity to snowball off that could be really big. So I actually do like this card. It's slow at 5 mana, right? Of course, it's hard to play these sometimes, but Warrior is a class historically that can afford to make these sort of lower tempo plays because they're playing with a lot of health, they're playing with a lot of removal. They can sacrifice a little bit along the way and then stabilize later. So Disruptive Spellbreaker could be really nice there. This may be one of those that kind of goes in and out depending on the meta, if there are like good enough spells to actually take, or if it's again a bunch of minion based aggro decks. Obviously the Spellbreaker is not going to fit very well in those sorts of metas, so you might see this one pop in and out, but I think will still be a card that gets played in certain pockets of the meta and certain eras of the meta. And then our final warrior card here is Last Stand, a new 4 mana spell. This one is a taunt synergy card. Draw a taunt minion and double its stats. So a little bit of a taunt tutor here and some stat doubling, which, you know, I always get a little nervous anytime a card says double. That's a powerful, big sort of word in Hearthstone. I'm pulling up, by the way, taunt minions in warrior real fast so you guys can get a picture of what's in standard format as I kind of stall here for a second. You can see, for instance, like the new Silver Fury Stalwart. This could be like an 8/16 for 6 mana. That's pretty big. You've got some of the like Lava Gorger and Onyxian Drake stuff that's been a little bit more staple. I thought maybe the Morshan Elite's kind of interesting since this copies itself. So it could be an 8/8 that copies into another 8/8. For instance, when doubling it, that's a 16/16. So there are some taunts here that are interesting when doubled. Of course, in particular, that one's pretty big and might be kind of impossible for an opponent to remove. But that said, man, this is a big price to pay, giving up 4 mana just for that doubling. Because, like, okay, yes, you're drawing, and drawing has a little bit of value, but there are a lot of other ways to draw and just play things at the same time or achieve other goals. In other words, this is really backloading the upside because you're both giving up the 4 mana now. That's, you know, you're losing tempo, you're sacrificing reactivity. But then also, like, if you're drawing a big taunt, it might be, you know, for instance, we identified that 6-drop. That's 2 turns before you're netting the benefit of these doubled stats. So you're just kind of pushing back the upside of this card. So I guess the question is a deck really going to be able to afford to do that? Is that a package that's worth committing to, or are there better ways to do similar sorts of things? Would you rather not, you know, have a 2-card combo that kind of invests a lot into a single big thing? I'm not sure I love that. I think I'd rather just run more removal and more card draw than this kind of, you know, awkward, passive, on the back foot kind of play here for the Last Stand. Now, I do see some real meme potential with this. We've already got Lorthamar that's doubling minion stats. and then this could double it again, and I'm like, yes, I want to do that. That sounds super fun. Doubled stats. Of course, Shaman can probably do that even better with all their battle cry cheesery and duplicating, but nonetheless, still something I'm excited to play. But from a competitive standpoint, I do worry the payoff for this one is going to lag a little too far behind all the mana and commitment to it. So I think that's going to be an issue. So now we're going to head over to Demon Hunter with a new legendary here and the introduction of an Outcast package. This is Fellerin the Forgotten, a 4-mana 3/3 battlecry. Add a random Outcast card to the left and right sides of your hand. They cost 2 less. Now, there are going to be some big payoffs for playing Outcast cards, like the Vengeful Walloper here, that I want you to keep in mind. This is a nice little 5/5 rush that's going to get cheaper as you play Outcast cards. Now, I also think we should take a look at the available Outcast cards currently in standard format. Particularly those that are 2 mana or less are really relevant for this legendary since he's reducing their cost by 2. But anything that's cheap-ish, I think, will still feel pretty good. And Outcast cards currently cap out at 4 mana, with quite a few that do come in under that 2 mana spot. And even I think some of these 3 mana ones you're not going to feel too bad about. Perhaps Vengeful Spirit here is the outlier that feels bad. I think even a 2 mana Kurtrus honestly will still feel pretty decent in a lot of cases. And I think pretty much every other card here is going to feel nice. Wayward Sage in particular, I realize I'm blocking Spectral Sight, but hopefully you know that card once I scroll there. Wayward Sage is just like going to chain some cost discounts potentially with the legendary. That sounds really interesting. And I could definitely see this being a way to fuel a lot of extra Outcast cards for an Outcast themed deck. But beyond that, I actually think Fellerin's probably one of those cards that just kind of works as a standalone. Basically, this is a 4 mana play that's letting you cheat out an extra 4 mana off of these discounts. So you're kind of getting this 3/3 and then a couple resources that are going to be potentially big tempo swings or card draw or just some solid plays, as we saw with a lot of those Outcast cards. So I think this could both be in an Outcast deck if that takes off, but I think this has a home beyond that. I feel like this card works in any kind of just like bigger Renathal deck. Just toss it in, and it's probably gonna make some sense as just a way to get a swing going and get some big Outcast payoffs that are actually really affordable. So in other words, I think Fellerin looks like a really strong card. All right, so moving on here to the Vengeful Walloper. This is a 7 mana 5/5 demon with Rush, importantly, and it costs 1 less for each Outcast card you've played this game. So, I think this starts to feel like a pretty solid play around 3 mana. I don't think a 4 mana 5/5 rush holds up, actually, so maybe 3 mana, and then of course if you get it down to 0 or something, the Vengeful Walloper could be a really big swing, both reacting to an opponent's board with rush, but sometimes just playing those 5/5s for free could be a really big threat dump, where your opponent just can't deal with the board and you start hitting them really hard, of course, in Demon Hunter. Now, how quickly and how reliably are you going to get this discounted, by the mid game where you're probably going to want to play this? Because if you wait too long, of course, the stat impact will get lower and lower over the course of a game. I don't think it's going to be that bad to play 3 to 4 Outcast cards, 5 Outcast cards, where this starts to feel really good. You're going to see some additional cheap Outcast here with cards like this one and some other ways to make Outcast cards as well. So you're going to have more fuel than just the set that we saw, which, if you had to hard run all of those Outcast cards to get this discounted, might be tough. But with additional support pieces, I think this does start to become a nice little incentive for an Outcast deck to put this stuff in there and create these potential swing opportunities while also potentially generating a lot of extra value. So you've got some tempo bundled in here with all these different cost discounts and swing cards with Vengeful Walloper and some value generation as well, which starts to look like a pretty complete package that can kind of do a little bit of everything. You could see that being a deck. So let's go ahead and talk about the Fierce Outsider. This is a nice new cheap Outcast card, I think, that's both great at delivering additional tempo, because this is a 1 mana 2/1 rush that can help you trade up on board a little bit, but also has Outcast. Your next Outcast costs 1 less. So this is helping you chain together some discounts. We also saw that Naga Outcast card that can discount stuff as well. So between all of this, you could really see yourself moving through a hand in pretty rapid fashion while still committing plays to the board and still developing tempo. And that sounds like a successful recipe for Hearthstone for me. And thankfully, Demon Hunter 2 has a lot of card draw, and we're actually even going to see some card generation that might help refill that hand. When you've often cheated a lot of mana like that, sometimes it can feel like you run out of steam, but I think there are even ways to help you do that in this class in particular to shore up that weakness for those bigger tempo commitments. So I like this card, man. This does a lot for 1 mana. This has that, sometimes it's just a 2/1 on turn 1 if you need it, that's helping you get something else out earlier. And sometimes it's just taking a little trade that keeps you alive. Now, of course, we should acknowledge with Outcast, obviously there are going to be scenarios where you have awkward hands and things aren't outcasting perfectly. But the higher the critical mass of Outcast cards, the more likely you're just going to be able to chain successful Outcasts together. And most of these cards are pretty cheap and might contribute to that rather nicely. You could see scenarios where, say, like a Vengeful Walloper is kind of stuck in the wrong spot and it's hard to get your Outcast cards going to get this discounted. Now, note that they don't have to be outcasted for this to get discounted. They just have to be played as Outcast cards, whether they have outcasted or not. So you could still kind of fix those problems. It just wouldn't be ideal. But, that's a function of the keyword itself. I'm certainly not going to use that to hold these cards back too much, because I think Demon Hunter has proven that Outcast can be a successful keyword. We've seen a lot of successful Outcast cards in this class so far, and I think having more of them actually just helps to make sure something is always in a good spot, basically, to make sure you keep the chains rolling. And then finally here for Demon Hunter, we have the Wretched Exile, a 2-mana 2/3 after you play an Outcast card, add a random Outcast card to your hand. Now, if there weren't discounts, and in particular discounts that can be banked, because keep in mind here for like Fellerin, this doesn't say they cost 2 less this turn, they just stay 2 less. So basically you could keep some 0-mana Outcast cards in hand. Same thing with the Fierce Outsider here. This is just your next Outcast card, it's not this turn. So you can set up turns with maybe, a couple 0-mana cards, maybe a few other 1-mana Outcast cards, and then play your Wretched Exile alongside all of those for potentially some big value. And then of course you can just chain off the top as well if you have enough mana or enough good reasons to play the Outcast cards that you find off the Exile. So you could see this as a pretty nice way to get more stuff and just keep things moving. And it's a low overhead at only 2 mana. That's not a big commitment into a given turn. So playing the Wretched Exile is not going to feel like you had to commit much in order to set all of this up. So I actually think this whole package looks like it's coming together rather nicely. I like the 3 Outcast synergy cards here, and I think Fellerin even stands above because I think he's good beyond an Outcast deck. But I still see some real potential here with all of this mana cheat and these big upsides. So this looks pretty good to me. Asvedon the Grand Shield is a 3-star card. Disruptive Spellbreaker is a 3-star card. Last Stand is a 2-star card. Fellerin the Forgotten is a 4-star card. Vengeful Walloper is a 4-star card. Wretched Exile is a 4-star card. Fierce Outsider is a 4-star card. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for this review. I'm pretty intrigued by this Demon Hunter stuff. This is one of those, like, it's definitely just a package right now. There's not enough to get like a whole deck together, but could still see this slotting in as a package into a Renathal deck. And then if you get additional Outcast support in the future, maybe it could be an entire deck, like an Outcast focused deck. But for now, just 8, 10, 12 cards or something, probably putting in alongside another package. I do see that working pretty well. I think these might be good enough to encourage a home for themselves. So that said, curious what you guys think. Do you like these Demon Hunter cards or not? Do you like the Warrior cards? I think they're solid enough. I think, again, tier 3 control Warrior or something, you'll be happy to run those from time to time. Just nothing crazy. But anyway, want to hear your takes. Thanks much as always for watching. And until next time, game on.